Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm very excited to have this fantastic panel here with us, where we'll be discussing all things transfer pricing, the latest trends, everything from spreadsheets to software, as our title here says, and uncover some of the latest trends in our industry. Before we dive into the actual webinar, I would like to take a moment to introduce our guests here. Maybe we'll start with you, TJ.
Hello, everybody. I'm TJ, or Thierry de Greef, a Dutch name. I'm the Director of Technology and Data at IDFD, so I do lots of things with AI and how we can serve our community.
Thank you, TJ. Next up, we have Adrian.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, Adrian here. I lead the transfer pricing and international tax function at Supergroup, based in Cape Town.
Thank you, Adrian. Last but not least, John.
Thank you. John McSorley. I'm a partner and co-founder at Illumis. We are a boutique tax technology firm that specialize in the implementation of the best tax technologies and workflow capabilities. About 20 years in tax, including about 8 years spent in-house in large pharmaceuticals.
Fantastic. Great to have you with us, John. And for those of you that are joining, my name is Blarina. I'm the product marketing lead here at Aibidia and responsible for what I call customer centricity, really bringing the voice of the customer back to the company and also uncovering the insights like the ones that we're sharing here today. So thank you to everyone for joining in. I'm very excited about the discussion we will have. And yeah, maybe we can walk you through a little bit the journey of this discussion here today. So we'll very quickly recap the Aibidia industry report that we do on a year-to-year basis. And we have some of the latest insights from that covering or guiding this discussion today. We will talk a little bit about technology, sharing some stories, have a little bit of discussion on that, and then touch on the topic of AI. What do we see when it comes to AI and transfer pricing? What are some of the considerations and maybe some stories from our panelists here? And then we will also have a look into the future. What are some of the trends that you should watch out for as we're discussing transfer pricing? Also, mind you, you can always type a question or a comment in the chat box area. We will be having and taking these questions in the end, so feel free to make it as engaging as you want. We really want your participation and hear your thoughts. All right. So without further ado, let's dive a little bit deeper into the discussion here. So first of all, as I've mentioned, Aibidia industry report, we are really focused on not just the customers that we serve, but really uncovering as to what is happening in the industry. So every year we release this report where we survey more than 148 transfer pricing and tax professionals, where this last year we've had 66 of our transfer pricing teams that were part of it, and the revenue was more than 3 billion. On a geographical spread, as you can see here in the image. So we really had the chance to uncover these insights from a good group of a pool of people, and we uncovered quite some interesting trends. So maybe let's dive into that. First of all, what we found out is that, to no surprise, I believe, there's an increased audit pressure. Where the data shows us there has been 4 times an increase in what multinationals are spending, more than $2 million per year on audits year on end. So yeah, we will also touch a little bit upon this and what this means as we share the experiences on this. The second one is the data question. We still see that 72% of the multinationals we've interviewed are still using decentralized data sources. So what does this mean in terms of transfer pricing? What does this mean in terms of audit readiness and what we're seeing in technology? We'll cover a little bit more on that as well. And then maybe the last trend to highlight here is the fact that technology adoption seems to be growing. So we've seen a jump in specialized TP software going from 22% to 42%. So when we're speaking about these trends, I want to go back maybe a little bit to the data part. I think this is a question or a topic that is often discussed in the industry. So it's no surprise to point out here that the vast majority of the people we have surveyed have really said that 72% of them are relying on data that is spread across multiple sources, multiple teams, and that can sometimes also make it challenging to do proper transfer pricing analysis and compliance. So maybe I'll open this discussion to the team that we have here. How do we see the challenge of data sources as it relates maybe to audit readiness and the wider challenge with that? When it comes to that, maybe John, I can put you on the spot and lead with this.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think in a modern day tax function, modern day business, you're always going to be dealing with data from multiple sources, multiple systems. Obviously, everybody will be doing their own initiatives to try and streamline that, not only just at a tax level, but at a finance level and an organizational level. I think what that means in practical terms, though, is when thinking about audit readiness and responding to those questions that are going to come in, you've got to think about how is that data organized. A lot of teams are looking at centralization of transfer pricing data, maybe within tools such as Aibidia. And the reason for that is thinking, okay, if as and when I get an audit in the future, I may get that audit at an entity level. From a tax authority, and I've got to respond to that holistically across the entity. So I don't want my cost allocation data sitting separately from my segmented P&L data, sitting separate from my statutory data. I want to think about how do I bring that together so that I can answer as fast as possible. If you take it up a level and think about audits at this other group financial level, when you're signing off on ETRs and things like that, the audit question will be slightly different. It'll be more looking at the transfer pricing position overall, substantiating how the different breakdown of profits is aggregated across the group. The same thing will be true in questions around CBCR, which is obviously going more and more public, etc. like that. So I think from a data readiness perspective, centralization in one form or another is usually commonly the goal. Obviously, everyone's on their own different journeys to that point, and battling the reality that data will always come from different sources and maybe not in the form you need is always going to be true. So I think it's a question of how can you as a tax team take control and bring that more into your wheelhouse, and how can you think about integration wherever you've got different data sources so that ultimately you can answer the question as fast and as reliably as possible, because audits are not decreasing in frequency and they're not decreasing in their digital nature. So yeah, centralization is key.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no surprise as well that we're seeing these statistics now that, this audit pressure is also putting more pressure to take a look at the data, take a look at what kind of processes and systems you have in place in order to support this goal. And maybe when we're speaking of the data quality and trusted data sources and all of that, how important is that, TJ, maybe from your perspective?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Just to first loop back to what John just said about efficiency and accuracy. It's not just about working faster, but I think a key element is you want to be able to have an answer in a certain way. You want to provide the right answer. So I think the great value is not doing it more quicker, but you want to be quicker in finding the right answer or be quicker in being prepared for that particular audit. So I think that is a key element. It's not about replacement, but the whole powers of AI itself will help you to enhance and empower you to do a better job. So when it comes to trusted sources, I think I alluded it before, it's all about the right answers. And we know there is a big certainty from large language models in general. They're very keen to provide an answer in itself. And at IBFD, we produce high quality content, and even having the logo there will give people the certainty. They know if they read that document, they know it's true. And we put much energy in there. So whatever we want to do when we use large language models, we want to build it around our corpus, and we like to call that using AI or generative AI around your corpus in a very trusted way. And combine it with other data sources. As John said, everybody is on a different level of maturity to get all the data in a single place, but the reality is really hard. We've been talking about the data lake, data swamps for a long time, but it's just a hard job to get everything together in this normative way as well. But AI can help you to do a better job there, but you need to use it around it, combine all these data sources, and to make sure you ground whatever your response is, ground it to the source. So if I got this filing report, I know the numbers are grounded in these reports. If I see, hey, I want to, this is because of a particular legislation, this is how I implement it or use this paradigm in a particular way, I want to read and source it and ground it in that particular piece of legislations or whatever has been published. So I think that is a key element, to do it in a trusted way. I think that's where the great value is.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that is one of the key kind of considerations to also take into account, right? It's not just the process in itself, but it's also like having this trusted data that you know that you will have ready in order to respond to these kind of audit requests, or just, have that kind of internal visibility into what John mentioned, global profit allocation, understanding what part of the business is being profitable, the things that you need to consider. I would love to have maybe perspective in-house, Adrian, from you. Like, how do you see the whole discussion of data, and where do you have any stories or anything you'd like to share from your end?
Yeah, thanks, Marina. I think ultimately, having fragmented and inconsistent data is a liability. When a tax authority, arrives with an audit or an inquiry, I've found in practice it's actually quite difficult to gather all the data from 2021 or 2022 and try and figure out what happened in that year, how were costs allocated, what were the key drivers. Sometimes there's new transactions and you're lacking support for it. So I think centralized data is key, and I think for transfer pricing teams specifically, it's also understanding that data, because practically in the real world, you'll have operational finance teams that have been doing things one way. You move to the next year, those people have left the business, and you have suddenly a new person in operational finance that did things slightly in a different way. So I think having consistency in your data, and I think technology plays a massive role in that, and that's what we are investing in at the moment, is just getting, I think, a higher quality of data and understanding that data quicker than ever is really, really key. I think tax authorities are, what I found is that when you do need that extra time to respond, because you need to find and figure out all these problems in the background and reconcile numbers, etc., it's quite a big scramble to find that information at the end of the day. And tax authorities, I've found recently, if you're requesting extensions because you need more time, those are sometimes denied, and you end up not potentially providing everything they ask for. So I think, yeah, definitely the fragmentation of data and your data being inconsistent across various teams is definitely a huge liability in responding to tax authorities.
Absolutely. And I think that this is maybe a perfect segue into the next statistic that we have from our report. And this one is focusing on technology adoption, right? So what is one way that we can think about solving the data challenge? And I think this is where technology can play a role. If we look at what the industry is telling us, it's really showing that there is some kind of recognition that these challenges exist, recognition that something needs to be done in order to tackle it, and technology is seen as a way to do so. So we've seen this momentum that is building. More and more organizations are planning to adopt technology for transfer pricing. So something that was 25% in last year has now gone up to 31%. And there is already this kind of discussion of, okay, what can we do today in order to support the processes that we need, whether that's from a data side, visibility, responding to audit requests. So maybe that also shows us a little bit better in terms of like the fact that automation seems to be a primary goal, right? So 63% of our respondents have said that they want to automate data and documentation. It's one of the top focus areas. And then, John talked a little bit about integration, and that also matters in all of this as well, showing that this is, again, another priority. And then back to TJ's point on AI, then we see this kind of recognition that, it's an exploratory stage where our industry is curious about it. Not only are we automating it, but how can we bring AI to all of this? So maybe discussing a little bit about this. What do we see in terms of the trends, and what are your thoughts on this? From automation, from technology solving some of the challenges, and what is your take on what you have seen up to now? Who wants to take the lead in this, answering this?
I'm happy to go. Thanks, Blarina. Yeah, I think in general as an industry, like this is really the last few years is the first time that meaningful transformation of a transfer pricing function has been possible. I think for years, if you think about a corporate income tax or a VAT return, corporate income tax have been mapping GL accounts to different tax treatments for years, and there's been systems to do that. Mapping transfer pricing data, which is more like cost centers, profit centers, functional dynamics to a schema and a process that can actually do what it needs to do in terms of presenting it in a meaningful way, and then being maintainable in reality for a tax team, probably as the main maintainers of it. I think the fact that now these types of technologies do exist, that just creates the momentum. Right now, people are thinking actually these problems can be meaningfully solved, and they can be meaningfully solved in not a 3-year program, right? Like I love to target things that can be done in 3 months, 6 months, maybe. Like, that's really real. So I think that's the main thing that in my mind is driving the interest, is the fact that there are viable, real ways to tackle this now, which has just not been true in the very recent past.
And if I may follow up or add to that, I think it's only been 3 years ago since OpenAI released ChatGPT. Before that time, no one, sidestepping a few machine learning engineers, understood what large language models was or what their power was. But now it's in the hands of everybody, and everybody can play with it. So I think that is also a big booster to see how you can take those different data sources from various places and normalize those, for example, or see how you can use these kind of tools and systems out there to generate assessment or impact on board, or even analyze these reports for gaps, for example. So I think it is also more in the hands of people to experiment with it. Now, in order to get it consistent, there's still a lot of work to be done. But I think the momentum is also building up because things are out there at the tip of the fingers for people to experiment with as part of the journey. And that's not ideal yet, but I think that is driving that momentum as well. And in the interactions I have with various clients, not only transfer pricing, but also in a broader range, everybody is trying to figure out, senior leadership is figuring out how can we use it to become more effective in the work we do. Everybody has slightly different use cases, how to address it. So I think also the ideation process, how to do it more effectively, is also supported by the whatever is out there. The examples are out there in the market, but also at a fingertip away. So I think that is helping significantly in the adoption of technology and to see what's possible, and more importantly, also see the limits of some of these technologies, because I think that's also essential. Before everybody talks about AI as the silver bullet that will address everything, but you also need to see where the limitations are and consider those as well.
Absolutely. And I think we have a couple more statistics on AI, so we'll touch a little bit more deeper on that. But maybe from the perspective of how do we see it from an in-house point of view, Adrian, can you tell us, you've gone through the challenges, you've mentioned the fragmented data, talking about your experience in-house. How do you see the adoption of technology, not just for you and your company, but maybe also among your peers?
No, I think it's becoming more and more a requirement rather than a nice to have. I think where you have audits, etc., that take up the majority of your time, and as we've seen the uptick in the spend on audits, I think audit activity is increasing. But I think just plainly said, a company would always invest in technology that's going to give them a return on that investment. And tax authorities are taking that view. There's enormous amount of money that's been spent in technology and risk analytics, etc., on the part of tax authorities. And I think from an in-house perspective, that needs to be recognized. They might be quicker on the ball than you tend to be at the end of the day when it comes to an audit scenario. So I think investment in technology, things like compliance, there's very standardized ways to present your documentation, etc., with some local nuances. But documentation and compliance really takes away from the value that TP adds in risk management and a multinational strategy at the end of the day. So I think it's becoming critical rather than a nice to have.
Nicely said. I would almost sometimes call it a tipping point, right? Maybe we are at a tipping point in the industry where we see this movement toward technology and movement into what we see in active adoption of technology. I don't know if we have any thoughts on that. Do we consider it a tipping point, maybe, for starters?
If I may reflect on it, I think it is the forces are building up that we do reach a tipping point where the powers of these technologies become available for the purpose, also at a reasonable cost. So I think we do reach a point where we're going to see a change or a pivot towards using technology more to support the work we do. So I want to emphasize the word support and empower ourselves.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is very important in a discussion of AI as well, right? The human in the loop, as we call it. John, not to interrupt you.
No, apologies. I think to TJ's point, there's a lot of forces contributing to it being a tipping point. I still see a lot of my clients talking about budgets being an issue. Obviously, they want to do something. I don't think anybody wants to sit around and do it the old way necessarily. There's a lot of downsides to that, including late nights and weekends. But it's like, okay, well, how do I build the business case to get on board with that tipping point? If you're lucky enough to work for a company that is super highly profitable, transfer pricing, profit splits is a big value driver inherently, then you may not have an issue, and you might just be able to say, hey, I need this because the audit environment is so high. If you work for a sort of a lower margin company where maybe traditional manufacturing or some of the retail industries at the minute, can be more difficult. And I think where I've seen clients be successful is sort of looking through to, okay, if I implement a technology, what is the actual ROI? Can I quantify that? And yes, I'm going to have to use some estimations, but just as an example, I know that all these big year-end transfer pricing adjustments are creating a VAT and a customs risk. Let's put a number to that. Now, that type of attitude and hard data is more likely to garner interest from heads of tax or CFOs of, hey, this is a problem that we're currently a silent problem potentially, but it exists nonetheless, and it's an audit waiting to happen. So I've spent a lot of time recently trying to help clients get onto the tipping point because they want to make the change, but they're struggling with the internal business case ROI. So in my experience, the more definitive you can get with numbers in that side, it really helps the case.
Adrian, I think this would be a great point, but for you to also say from your perspective, like how do you see or have you built the case internally for technology? Would that be okay if you jump in with that thought?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing that I did in onboarding tech within our group, transfer pricing tech, was I first took the approach of looking at, well, what are potential cost savings in terms of documentation and relying on advisors to compile documentation. I think that was my starting point. And you can always theorize as to how much you would save, and you count your local files that you need to file at the end of the year. You count the number of benchmarkings that you have to refresh, etc. All of those touch points, and then you present, how technology is going to help you save money on those costs. But I don't think it's just that angle. I think that's very helpful, especially with multinationals that have smaller teams in-house. But the key thing for me has been not spending a large amount of time on documentation, on the things that could have been automated. You tend to rather rely on your advisors to review your documentation and really look for risks, rather than spending their time compiling documentation. It can get quite messy when you're trying to deal with a risk they've highlighted whilst they're in the middle of drafting documentation. So I think from that perspective, the where you can save time on things that can be automated and really add value more on the strategy side, the business really starts to see that, where you get quite involved in the strategy and new entities popping up. You can focus on real value add activities rather than documenting what the business did a year ago.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic also reminder, right? It's not just about the market pressure, the regulatory pressure that you see, but also internally why teams need technology in order to better collaborate, to have this kind of visibility, and to spend time on value adding activities.
And I do concur on that whole trend, what John and Adrian have elaborated, that it's not just about return on investments are more important, but the key driver is not always budgetary, right? We need to do cut saving, save on the money we spend, but also it's for risk management. The moment we do invest in it, our audit reports do get better, for example, or we are far better to go to the particular data source to find it out. And that I've seen that awareness growing at senior managers in the boardrooms as well. So it's can, in that sense, it's also maturing the value of these technologies and to what end you're using it.
Mm-hmm. And if I can get your take, do you think that this trend will continue? Do you think that, let's say, if we were to hypothesize going into the next year, do you believe that the adoption of technology will continue to grow from your perspective?
I think it will continue to grow, because I think if we look back to how we started a few minutes ago by saying, did we reach a particular tipping point? I think this portion of AI, where we talk about the adoption of large language model, will make a change and will have an impact. Repeat, it's only been 3 years since everybody started to speak about large language models and generative AI. And in that journey of 3 years, it changed tremendously what the use cases are, where the value is from managing the risks, or where the models were not performing correctly, to taking up follow-up steps, or even thinking about other use cases. And I think given it is at a touch point where everyone can experience to some extent, it will be at different levels in the organization. It will generate awareness how you can take value out of the technology. And that even asking that question will also trigger the momentum. Might sound light, but now the hard part is in actually seeing if that will work out. So I'm an optimist on that part.
Great. And yeah, that brings us to the next segue perfectly, our widely discussed topic of AI. It was one of the trends mentioned in our industry report as well. We really are seeing that AI adoption has started to take traction, but it's still in the beginning stages, right? So we had about a limited amount of respondents who said that they either use it to some minimal degree. We have 40%, and then much less on the heavy side. And when speaking of AI, what do we think as to why this is the case, right? So yes, AI has just come out in terms of more and more visibility, having, changing the direction of not only transfer pricing, but maybe wider industries and, disrupting the workflows as we know it. So what is the take from a transfer pricing perspective? Maybe what do we see across clients? What do we see across, from the in-house perspective, and then the use of technology with the data behind it? So maybe I can get each one of you to provide your own perspective. We'll start with John.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think as TJ said, it's all pretty new in relative terms. I think probably rewind a year, there were even still people that hadn't heard of it. I think that would be hard pressed to be true anymore. The majority of my clients are using AI as, I'll call it, a productivity enhancer at a relatively basic level. Helping draft emails, helping even maybe do a bit of tax research, but then the question of trust comes up, which I know TJ will be well versed to speak to. The large language models are enhancing very, very quickly. There's a couple of areas I'm particularly excited about that I think are going to create a new tipping point of adoption. One is very domain specific AIs that are specifically trained to respond in certain ways to certain things. So I know TJ will talk about the IBFD and how that works, and actually I'll save that mainly for him. But that really means that actually clients can start to have a much better audit trail in the types of questions that they ask. So if they ask a question about tax, they know where the response is being sourced from. Historically, we would have researched that manually and scrun through well-organized sort of a database, etc. Now we don't need to do that very much. So that's really going to start to build efficiency of answering some of the harder questions. If you think about then layering those types of LLMs on top of really strong structured data, which we talked about earlier, then the likelihood of them being able to give meaningful insights and responses kind of goes up. So I think that trend will only continue. We're constantly sort of testing the boundaries of what can be achieved, and companies such as yourselves, Aibidia, are investing a lot in sort of taxonomies and knowledge graphs and other things to underpin these, which is really, really cool. The other area that I think is perhaps talked about less, and which I'm almost equally excited about, is agentic AI for, I'm going to call it the grunt work. If I think about where I used to spend a lot of my time in-house, and I have multiple clients where this is true, as a transfer pricing professional, I may need to review multiple tens, hundreds of cost centers, and I might need to speak to people. I might need to find out what's in those, what is that cost. Yes, I can look at the GL postings. Yes, I can look at the POs, but how does that really give me the flavor of what's going on? I might need to move to more of a functional sort of interview, etc. AI that can screen vast amounts of data. We built one very recently that has the sole purpose of trying to interview people about their cost centers. Its entire purpose in life is to try and get hold of a person in finance, send them an email, send them a text, even phone call. That sort of technology exists now, to try and get an understanding of what are the types of costs in there. Why is it 10% bigger this year versus last? All these kind of screening basic questions that historically would just eat a lot of time of a tax function to sort of even know where to invest in those deeper dives. So I think that the technologies that exist now and will explode over the next year or two will be agentic AI that can support doing those tasks at scale and doing them reliably. And I would guess in the relatively near future, when you combine workflow AI with really domain specific AI, that you can even start to think about more advanced, like, how many people should I functionally interview this year? Because I might now have the capability to functionally interview everybody if I wanted to. Now, does that replace the human? No, absolutely not. You're not going to outsource to AI tomorrow. But these are the types of things that are feasible in the pretty near future.
And I think that also brings us to the question of, we often hear about 2026 being the agentic AI, and I don't think that is any different in transfer pricing with the use cases that we see. But maybe from a perspective, what we have now versus where we're going next, we have a close collaboration with IBFD. So TJ, maybe I'll let you cover that and talk a little bit about the whole journey of AI and where do we see it being applicable, and not just like transfer pricing, but tax technology in general.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that is a very interesting topic. For me, the powers of agentic AI is that you distill a complicated problem into smaller problems. And then you come sometimes, as John just mentioned, sometimes you have generic AI toolings that do a particular thing for you, but then you combine it with something either in-house developed or a vendor has a very domain-specific agent, and you can start to combine those or orchestrate those together. I think that is where that is a thing that people understand. But it's going back to what I said before, at different levels in the organization. It's not just that the developers need to build it out, but agents are out there. You can actually, if you use Copilot or some use the OpenAI functions, there's a bunch of agents, and you can tie them together. And I see also differentiation between the younger generation. That I was doing a workshop the other day with some internal departments, and it was a young team, and you just mentioned a few things, and they start to do it, where others are far more really want to understand it and adopt it in a different way. So there is also a whole spectrum of adoption that is varied within and between organizations. But 2025, everybody talked about agentic AI, but I think 2026 will be also the year where it will get more hands and feet on how you actually combine it together. Before I move on to the journey a little bit about IBFD on the AI trajectory, in my experience with clients, I also see a variety of clients who take that agentic approach and start focus on an agent that is able to collect all kind of information sources, and then in a later stage they want to build an agent internally that does an impact assessment, and a follow-up agent will distribute it within 1,000 text functions within in a large organization, because they don't have always the expertise, whereas some of these areas will still require manual work. So that whole thinking about agentic AI in some organizations is more mature, but I also recognize what John said before. Doesn't have to be always in those numbers, and I think the numbers of the report you just showed, Blerina, also indicate that not everybody is equally at the stage to adopt it, and I think that is also normal, because you don't always have to be the forerunner, dependent on what you do as an organization. A few words on the journey of AI with IBFD. IBFD is an organization that's been it's a foundation. We've been around for 87 years, and our reputation is about trusted sources in an independent voice. So we put much effort there, and definitely the human element is key. Whatever we do, we still want to double check it, triple check it, to make sure everything is in the right fit. We take the best sources to actually build a particular interpretation of legislation. So that is our core value, and we do want to partner with good organizations, because if you want to use AI in a wise way, it is an investment. I think Adrian or John said it before, that those could be massive investment you need to do, because in order to do it right, it's not so difficult to get a portion right, but in order to get the last 20% right, and that's very much in the work we do as DP experts as well. We want you want to be as closely right as possible, but not for like just 70%, and that's where partnerships is key. We as IBFD know our content really well. We can deliver the content. We know how to search through the content, and we can do it in an AI way. We can do it in a classical way. But that journey we also want to do together with the clients and see how you can blend it together in transparent partnerships. So whatever IBFDs can do to help to make agents that act as a supportive agents that helps you to find the right information, to know where it's sourced from, and to extract something from there. I think that's where the value is for end users, and that's something we support from IBFD.
Nice, fantastic. And then for those of you that are joining, Aibidia has a product with IBFD. It's called TP Aurora, our AI research assistant. So I'd highly encourage all of you to have a look in our website. We'll post a link here, and you can check it out. Make sure that you see how it has been not just developed, but the value that it brings, as from the data trusted perspective, knowing that it is reliant on IBFD's credible data sources and giving you the answers on multiple use cases, right? Everything from audit readiness, understanding deadlines, to really being your on-the-go partner, so to say, in the transfer pricing journey that you have. But yeah, I will kindly encourage all of you to check it out. But when speaking about AI, I'm very curious also maybe hear from you, Adrian, as to how do you see it within your company? Like, is there talk about AI, AI tools in general, and what is the appetite for it?
Yeah, I think just going back to the slide that you shared a moment ago, and looking at how I think 20% were in the category of moderate use of AI, and then 18% was moderate and 2% was heavy. And the difference between curiosity and execution, I think, just speaking to peers that are in-house, I think everyone's very much at the curiosity stage still. Whereas if I look at tax authorities, they were at the curiosity stage, I think 2 or 3 years ago. They are very much in the execution phase. They using AI to flag inconsistencies, anomalies. I've heard recently that they're actually using cases that they've recently won to then use AI and start scanning through entities with similar transactions. It's quite mind-blowing, I would say, as to how they've adopted AI. I think they're obviously seen a real return on their investment in it. And I think from an in-house perspective, I really feel that if you're not exploring it, or at least understanding it, or the implications of it at this point in time, you really should be thinking about that in the very near future.
And maybe that's a really nice segue into also like the perception of AI usefulness. Very briefly to cover this, it is no surprise, I think, to any of us here that the value is still not seen as something that is widely recognized in this exploratory stage, as we mentioned. So we see that it is something that is up in traction, but many also have not maybe tested the waters. So from that perspective, are there maybe risks or considerations that you would want to share with the audience when it comes to AI as well? I think it's important to also not just talk about the value it brings, but also some of the considerations as we bring this topic in discussion.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of conversations and reviews of this with clients. I think it's interesting that it's somewhat useful. So there's a recognition that it's useful, but there's a lot of organizational questions that immediately come, like, how do I know it's right? Is a very common question. If you're asking something that is a research-based question, and it can present you with a source, maybe you can get over that hurdle pretty quickly. I think the other thing that people say is, well, it won't get all the way there. And that use actually tends to be like a stopping point of, okay, we can't move forward. But actually, I think what we've found is that getting creative with how you stitch things together. So you might have, TJ mentioned the concept of multiple AIs to do different things. Absolutely, that's the case. Sometimes it's a case of single AIs that are connected to platforms that do things particularly well. So you may have an AI that reviews your VAT invoices and scrapes off all the data, and then gives you an initial assessment of whether it thinks that makes any sense. Would you rely on that? Maybe not. But actually, do you take that into a deterministic engine, something that's existed for a while that more applies hard logic rules, and you combine those two to get a much more enriched version of what you were getting before? So I think it's a case of, yes, if you're just logging into ChatGPT and typing in things, I totally see how you hit a blocker super fast, right? Because that will only take you so far. But if you think actually that piece of AI combined with these other couple of things, maybe it's me as a human, maybe it's another system as a orchestration layer, that's where you can really unlock some interesting things. And that's where I fundamentally see tax functions in general going, because the obligations continue to go like this. We can't continue to have the cost of delivery just go like this. So I think ultimately that's where things will head. But yeah, it makes total sense to me based on honestly, if you don't have the time either, if it's your full-time job to keep the lights on and make sure you're responding to audits and all, you can't have time to think, well, I'm just going to create my own agentic workflow to do this today, right? Like that, there's a big sort of time crunch too. So I think that's where looking to people that focus on that kind of thing full-time, you can unlock some interesting insights.
Yeah, very well said. And I think the other risk or consideration that I often hear about, especially maybe from a transfer pricing perspective, is the data. Sometimes they say an AI model is only as good as the data that you feed it. From that perspective, also, I know TJ, you come from a well-known institution that has all this credible data. How do you see it from your point of view?
It could be indeed the case that the data is not completely correct, but I think that's where also the powers is. I think John alluded to you can orchestrate it. It can be done by different systems, different AI systems, some more systems that are out there. It's been doing a really good job for a long time. So combining those. But you can also use the AI to find the gaps, right? So if you see, hey, there is an outlier in your data and you should focus on it, then one of these busy experts can focus on it, but hopefully that expert is not so busy anymore because part of the more mundane work has already been done. I think that the true value lies within a task. What do you want to do? To what extent? Still review it. You still want to have the human touch to it, and some other work you want to focus on. I think that then you also get a good value for the tax professionals that exist there. From an IBFD side, I think the use case I hear resonating a lot is indeed from, yes, how can we tailor tailor your content or your news or your transfer pricing documentation specifically to our needs, because each organization has unique needs. And I think that's where partnering with those clients or partnering with, for example, we now do in a great collaboration with Aibidia, together, most from the things you're comfortable with and what you've been building, but sometimes you need to sit together to really understand where the details are in order to bring it to that next level. So it is about how you use the data, how you use the content, and to make sure that some of the risks associated to AI, how do you know it's right, as John just said, or okay, it's nice that I get a source there, but can you also point me to that particular piece that I'm investigating? That will help you to build those trust with the system, know your rights, and layer it out. But also, hopefully, the whole chain of systems can help you to point out where some of the weak points are. Because how great would it be if you have it and you file it and you say, yeah, this is the best we can do with all the system and all the people, but here is your weak spot. So there are agents out there that help you reason about where to focus on. John, you refer to agents that help you in job interviews to help you strategize about how you work with an auditor, for example. So I think that's key, being transparent when you partner on what you need and to find the right people there. One remark, what I also sometimes you hit the boundaries of budgets, as I think you said, Blerina. There's also the capacity within the organization. Sometimes you do hit an IT organization that has many different priorities. Getting everything sorted out, getting the agents deployed will also require time of those organizations. There could be security implications that need to be sorted out or made transparent. So I think one advice I would also give, to make sure your stakeholders within your organizations are up to date and aware what the plans are, because sometimes it is good to invest up front rather than just say, hey, we've got everything ready, and then suddenly there is no time on a particular roadmap. And it's not something I experienced, but I've seen it in the different literatures. And I saw Adrian and John nodding, so they do recognize that scenario.
Yeah, and maybe from the other side of perspective, before we wrap it up and leave the chat open to some of the questions we'll receive, Adrian, from your point of view, do you think that AI will change the skill set as required for transfer pricing professionals today? Like, what is your view on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of transfer pricing policies and determining what, the most appropriate methods to apply, etc. I think there still is quite a bit of judgment required in terms of nuances, etc., that AI might not pick up on. But in terms of its use case and time saving, I don't think in 5 years we'll be asking advisors to compile transfer pricing documentation. I think there will be affordable tools out there to be able to do that. I think that just moving forward, its real use case for me and what I'm most interested in is that risk management, making sure your data is aligned to your policies, etc., and that once it reaches a tax authority, you can have full confidence in what you've provided. And that also touches quite a bit on what John mentioned around the trust, etc. And I think currently for me, there is output risk in terms of the data that actually comes out of your sort of more available tools at the moment. But TP professionals going forward, I think it's going to change how we work on a day-to-day basis. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned the advisory, because I'd like to have maybe John quickly chip in from your perspective. Where do you think AI will bring the most value to you from the advisory point of view? Like how will it have an impact on the work that you do today and moving forward?
I think there's a domain specific AIs, right, that in-house tax professionals are using. Equally, all advisors are either leveraging AI or building AIs. If you think of one of the big firms, you've got to capture kind of that institutional knowledge, and how do you try to transfer that? So for sure, it is changing the way clients ask questions, and therefore it's changing the type of answers that they want back. So I think, and then it's to keep cost effective in an increasingly efficiency-led world, you've got to really use AI to accelerate your own responses. Now, there's been various blunders in different publications of people over-relying to that point, right? And that's, you've got to think how you manage that. But yeah, we don't want to outsource our opinions to AI, but equally, in terms of actually putting pen to paper and responding meaningfully to clients, absolutely AI is a huge accelerator.
Great. Thank you. We've talked quite a lot about AI, right? The opportunities, the considerations, possible risks, use cases. Maybe we'll take quickly 2 minutes in the end to grab an opinion from each one of you as to what you think are some of the maybe a top key trend that the transfer pricing industry needs to look out coming into the next year. What would you highlight from your perspective?
I would say I think it'll be agentic workflows. I think we're experimenting with them now, but they were historically a lot of kind of custom build to get them to work. That is very soon not to be the case anymore. And I think you'll see a lot of people starting to self-serve real AI-led processes, such as data gathering, first data level review, things like that. So I really do think now is credibly the time where that will be happening.
Thank you, John. TJ?
Yeah, I think for me, there are two things that stick out. Trusted sources. There's more sources than just IBFD, but trusted sources, and making sure your opinion, your advice that the systems are providing as part of this agentic workflow are grounded. So grounding, I think it's key, grounding it. And again, it doesn't have to be the external source. It can also be grounded in the data set that exists in-house. I think that will build up trust, because it gives you indications to actually do have the capability to check it. Not that you have to check everything, but it will help you as a professional in this rapidly changing landscape to see, does it actually make sense? We speak a lot about AI, we speak a lot about large language models and generative AI. the powers of a large language model is to generate language. It's not inherently a knowledge model. And that, for me, the grounding is key, because it can do stuff based on information, based on data, based on content, and therefore this grounding principle, being able to look back where it found and base its information or opinion about, is key. I think that's going to be an element that I'm passionate about, and I think also for IBFD, I think that also going to be a driver in these in the transfer pricing domain.
Thank you, TJ. And Adrian.
Yeah, for me, I think it's all about reaching a level of comfortable tax certainty, if there ever was such a thing, but really leveraging the power and developments in AI to try and achieve that for your internal stakeholders. I would love to tell the people I report to that this is what your tax is going to be for the next 5 years in terms of transfer pricing. So I think as close as we can get to in reaching some level of certainty, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you, Adrian. So let's now move on to the chat and receive a couple of questions from your end, and get the opinion of our experts here to share with you. See you in a bit. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We have a couple of questions in the chat. The chat has been buzzing. There's been a lot of different activities, so it's great to see everyone being so interested in the topic. I would like to maybe feature a couple of questions. If you have anything else, feel free to write it. So there was one of the questions from a practical experience. I think maybe TJ, that would be a good one for you. From a multinational standpoint and network security and data privacy, is there a preference of building your own platform or maybe use third-party suppliers like IBFD and Aibidia? What are your thoughts on that?
The thoughts are it really depends. There are some organizations that want to not go out with their data because they feel if you ask a question and you reach out, even if it's a trusted source, that could be a risk, or there might be a company policy. So they really build it themselves. Those are typically the larger organizations. And that has to do with privacy settings, with compliance as well. Sometimes it's also requirements from the IT department. I think earlier I mentioned that sometimes IT departments do have a busy roadmap, and sometimes that leads to friction when you actually build something. And I think that's the other side of the coin, where many organizations, and also some smaller M&Es, really like to leverage the toolings because you can plug them in. And we also spoke about this agentic workflows, where it's about combining the different ideas into a bigger thing together, so you actually get the answer you're looking for. So I see two use cases. Either it's custom built, and then it leads to a pretty significant project to actually build it. And then as an organization, you need to make sure you can deliver the content, the data, or services they need, or they rely on the tools to solve part of the puzzle and hopefully chain it all together. Thank you.
Thank you, TJ. I think we'll take one more question because we're aware of the time. And one of the other questions here was related to the data ingestion and capabilities with Aibidia. John, you work closely with us, so I don't know if you wanted to share maybe your thoughts on this.
Yeah, maybe just a general comment. I think the question was specific to Workday, and I can see you've responded to that in the chat. I think in general with data connectivity, I hope a lot of clients go through that journey, and I guess there's a curve of where you can end up. At the top end of the curve is full integration, sort of real-time feeds. Normally companies don't start there because actually there's a lot of dependencies, risk, things you've got to figure out in design, etc. The bottom end of the spectrum is kind of your Excel uploads, right, which is nobody really wants to be doing. But actually, usually where companies start is sort of a midpoint, which would be automated kind of batch connectors, automated upload downloads. It helps you to control things like versioning, ownership, etc. And once you're really comfortable with that, then you move to more
full integration, APIs, etc., to do the real-time feeds. So tons of options to work through, and it's just a case of kind of what you're comfortable with and the right timing based on the process as you're designing it.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I think, I don't know if you want to take one more question. There was an interesting one that asked about the AI application and which is the most efficient in analyzing the data for TP discussion. There was a mention of different tools that we have out there, Gemini, Copilot, ChatGPT. If you were to kind of like answer this very briefly, since I think the audience might be interested, what would be your take or your suggestion on this?
I think I guess as I'm reading the question, I'm trying to interpret exactly what it's getting at. But I think there's a point around how is AI disrupting the reporting of TP, but there's also the piece around AI as a value driver for organizations and the IP attributable to that, and what does that mean, and how does it drive that for sure will have a disruptive effect on TP. It will cause people to revisit things like functional analysis and where a DEMPI function's done and all those kind of things as AI starts to have a bigger role in how all organizations run. So for sure, whether that'll lead to a revision in things like the arms of principle and related guidance, TBD. In my experience, law lags behind. I think it'll be interesting to see as the tech curve goes like this, how quickly does law keep up with it? It might be that actually that needs to move to maybe they need to have AI start helping them draft the laws a little quicker so that they can keep up.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the practical use cases as well. I'm aware that we've taken maybe a little bit more time than we anticipated. The discussion was quite insightful. We have a lot to cover, so I would really like to take a moment to thank our valuable panelists. John, thank you so much for joining us. TJ, thank you so much. And Adrian as well. He had to drop up a little bit earlier. But for the rest of you, I would highly recommend you check out the links that were shared. Thank you so much for your participation. Keep the questions coming, keep the suggestions coming, and we'll continue to host webinars like this on the pressing transfer pricing trends. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone, and speak to you soon. Thanks again.